Okay, welcome back to another kneeling video. This is an intermediate kneeling video and we're still in our ground movement mode. So if you haven't done any of our kneeling videos yet, go back to our essential kneeling videos just to kind of get used to some of the language and some of the basic movements with kneeling, your kneeling practice. But if you're ready to move forward, to progress, work with me along with this intermediate video. So I'm going to ask you to start in your low kneeling or just your kneeling position. So you remember our ankles are plantar flexed here, so come on with me and get into this movement. Very low risk here, and we're not going to talk a lot about modifications in this video because we covered those in our essential videos. So plantar flexed ankles, ischium or sits bones sitting on the heels, and thinking again about our weights and spaces. So our hips, rib cage, shoulder girdle, head, those are all weights. We're trying to make sure our weights are stacked, and the spaces between those weights would be the neck is a space, and the abdomen or abdomen and low back could be considered a space. So sit here in this position for a second just to kind of warm up and get ready for more intermediate kneeling work. Breathing. Breathe through your nose. When you can, eyes on the horizon. If you are just using this as a way to warm up for more aggressive work, or as a way to cool down for more aggressive work, or just as a pliability exercise. If you are in more of a contemplative mood, or you're wanting to engage in some contemplative work, eyes toward the ground would be good in this position. So those are options. And if you're working with the eyes on the horizon, I will encourage you to start to look around and work with some neck pliability in this position. And then let's add some rotation. So when I rotate, I'm sort of using this force couple thing. So I'm pressing on my outside thigh and rotating around. So you can try the same thing. Remember, most of our rotation comes from our thoracic spine, not our lumbar spine. So this is a good way to get some thoracic rotation. Okay, so enough of the just kneeling. Let's move on to let's progress to some more intermediate work here. So I'm going to ask you to take your ankles or your heels and work into this closed foot position in low kneeling or kneeling. Let me explain what I mean by closed and open foot. So if I'm going to be in an open foot position in kneeling or in any natural movement training, this is what we're referring to. So the ankle is, some people might call this an everted ankle. Or if I'm speaking in structural integration terms, if you're doing some structural integration work with us, this might be a laterally rotated ankle. So this is an everted, laterally rotated, or open in natural movement training foot. A closed foot is where the ankle is more closed than neutral, right? So it's almost like a medially rotated ankle. You'll feel what I mean as you experiment with this, but I'm going to ask you to try to get your heels on the outsides of your hips. And one way you can play with that is by getting your hand hooked into the inside of your heel, on either heel, and just very gently encourage those heels to come to the outside. So there's a lot of rotation that's happening with this. A rotation in the ankles, rotation in the lower leg. Now, for knee issues, this is very healthy work. And the reason for that is that our knees how should I say this? Our knees are more about flexion and extension. They're not just about flexion and extension, they're also about rotation. So our knees need to rotate and gate, or the joint needs to have rotation available to it. And this is definitely, you'll feel it in your knees, working with the way the tibia relates to the femur, or the lower leg bone relates to the upper thigh bone. Okay, so this is our first intermediate stop here. We're just trying to get into this closed foot position and breathe, warm up your ankles. Okay, next I'm going to ask you to take one foot, right or left, we'll do both, into an open position. So, and then lean into that side. So in this case, I have my right foot in an open position and I'm leaning into that. So now we're rotating that tibia externally instead of internally. That might feel, your knee may feel that too. Your ankle most definitely will. Okay, and we'll bring that ankle back into neutral and then open up the other one. And my left foot right now is away from the camera, and so you can't see this, but you can see that my right foot is in neutral and I'm leaning toward my left foot. Okay, and then I'm going to ask you to try both feet open. You might, so you see me supporting my feet here. That's not just me leaning or posting on my feet. I'm actually supporting my feet. This is a lot of sensation. So gentle is the way, and less is more in these positions. Okay, and then come back into a neutral position. So already we've covered several intermediate moves right here in this low kneeling or kneeling position. Why don't we go ahead and post behind us with one hand. You'll feel a stretch in your quads. Post with the other. Okay, and then try posting with both hands. Now, you may feel more comfortable with your ischias forward of your heels in this position. That may not make sense to you because it's not real anatomical language, but I have scooted my sits bones on that side of my heels, right? So play around with a posterior tilt or an anterior tilt in your pelvis. See what feels good. Maybe both. And obviously you're getting a strong quad stretch here. Now, if you want to take this down to just a resting position, it's not really resting, a full stretch on the ground, you could lay you could lay all the way back. So after posting, you could scoot yourself back, and you'll see my knees pop up because I don't have that pliability quite yet, or today. So just an option. Only go here if you feel like you're at that level in your pliability work where you can play here. Okay, to get out of this, if you're in it, I suggest rolling to your side. Okay, so now from our low kneeling position and all those variations with the ankle, let's get into a flexed foot position. So flexed foot position is toes tucked. And we're going to go through those open and closed positions again in order to get more toe pliability. So open foot, leaning back. So now when I do this, I really feel more of a stretch in the little toe side of my foot, which feels good. That doesn't get stretched a lot in these toe flexed foot kneeling positions. So I'm using my hands to gently take my heels outward and put pressure on my little toes. Okay, and then we'll do the same thing inward, but I want you to go ahead and separate your knees into this open knee position and sit with your big toe balls touching. So now the big toe balls are touching. So turning toward the camera, it might look like this. And so we're getting a lot of stretch in the big toes here. Breath is important. Okay, good. Let's just rest in our kneeling position. That's a lot. Okay, let's toggle back through every single one of those movements we've done so far. We're going to move a little quicker here, and I don't mean move fast, but we won't hang out in each position as long. So we're in this low kneeling position, and we're trying a closed foot position here by pulling our ankles into a closed foot position, pulling our heels outward with our hands. Good. We'll go left open foot with a lean onto that ankle. Great, and then we'll bring that ankle back into neutral. Right open foot with a lean onto that ankle. Both open feet, support if you need to. Back to low kneeling, and then we're going to post behind us. Work with where your hips are in space if you need a more posterior tilt. And then if you are up for it, lower yourself down. If you're not up for it, stay in the previous position. Coming out of that, flexed foot kneeling. Flexed foot kneeling with a closed ankle or foot. And then we're going to open the knees, balance more on the big toes. Okay, great. So moving on here, we're going to do some transitions from a bent sit position toward a kneeling position, which will give us an opportunity to work with more extensibility in the quads. So from this position, this is bent sit, I'm posted. I'm going to use that post to my advantage, and I'm going to push off of one hand. So I'm pushing off the left hand, drive the knees forward, come up to flexed foot kneeling, back with the same hand. Now we're in bent sit position again. Okay, other hand. Now you'll hear me say other, left, right, whichever one you want to start with is fine, so we don't get confused with left, right as we're working here. But so now I'm reaching back with my right hand. Okay, now let's try that with both hands. So we're going to drive the knees forward, both hands leaving the floor relatively at the same time. And then try to reach back with both hands relatively at the same time, which this is some counterbalance practice, because as you reach back and reach your hands closer to the ground, you've got to counterbalance with your knees. So again, here. Okay, now take one foot ahead of the other, and we're going to press ourselves up into sort of a modified deep knee bend, really. But I'm just going to stay posted. I might scoop my hands up here a little bit. Now the idea is, with this modification here, The modification being my feet are staggered. I'm really working with, in this case, my right quad reaching, or knee reaching toward the ground, so I can get some extensibility worked into that quad, but I'm also getting a lot of toe stretch here. Okay, and then we'll switch. So whichever foot you add forward, go to the other foot. Great. Okay. So now let's work with some side open kneeling positions. So from this, it's going to seem, this is going to feel kind of like a Cossack stretch. I'm actually sitting on a flexed foot here on the left. And then I just want you to come up into just a long side kneeling position. So long because I have one leg out, and it's obviously to the side, and it's really a half kneeling. So long side half kneeling. I'm going to come down to my heel again. So my left foot in this case is remaining in that, that flexed foot position. My toes are extended, up and down. Work back and forth on that. You'll notice, I hope you can see this, my right ankle is staying in a closed foot position. You could let the toes go toward the ceiling. I like the feeling of trying to work with getting more length on the outside or the lateral line or the lateral fascial compartment in my lower leg. Some good work there. Okay, and then let's go to a plantar flex position. So now my left foot is not flexed. I'm sitting on the heel, but my foot is plantar flexed. So that looks like this. And then from there, we're going to come up to this long half side kneeling position. So back and forth. Just getting you ready for some more advanced movement with your kneeling practice. Okay, let's go ahead and switch to the other side. So long, half kneeling, flexed foot, long half side kneeling, flexed foot. So this leg out to the side, my right foot is flexed. In other words, or my right toes are flexed. I think I said extended earlier, and yeah, it's kind of interesting because really your toes are extended. In natural movement training, we call this a flexed foot position, but the toes are really extended. Don't get confused by that. So in other words, I'm sitting on my toes. In yoga we say toe sit sometimes. So just up and down here, working with that. Again, an option is to let that knee or the toes go up toward the ceiling. Okay, and then plantar flex. In other words, take the ankle and take it out of that flexed foot position. You're sitting on the heel, back and forth. I invite you to tune into your breathing. Longer exhales than inhales is good for this more restful type work. Okay, great. Okay, just rest in your kneeling position. So we're going to work with some balancing on each of these in these kneeling positions now. So come up with me to tall kneeling. So, and I'm in not a flexed foot tall kneeling, but a plantar flexed tall kneeling here. And then just practice balancing on one knee. and then we'll switch to the other. Think in terms of seating that femur into the hip. Switch. Trying to make one long line. It's relatively difficult. One long line as if the femur wants to go out, right? So I'm trying to seat that femur in the hip and have one long line from the hip down to the knee. Although I am taking my center of gravity over that knee and sort of side bending a little. Great. Okay, so now let's work with half kneeling position here. And in this case, I'm going to ask you to have a flexed foot half kneeling position. This intermediate work again is getting you ready for more advanced movement. So we need to make sure that for some more advanced movement you have access to your hamstrings in this position. So I'm going to ask you to flex your hamstrings. In other words, flex the knee and bring your left heel up toward your hips. You may want to introduce a little bit of shift forward too as you do this. Try that a couple times. If you get a hamstring cramp, which is likely, just come out of the position. So you may want to sit in sort of a long bent sit if you're getting a hamstring cramp. Okay, but on the other side, so we're here, half kneeling, flexed foot, bring that heel up and maybe shift your hips forward. Just practice that a few times. New sensations in the knee, maybe for you. Again, your recovery position for that might just be a long, half-long sit. Great. Okay, so now let's go back to our half kneeling, half side kneeling position here. And I've got my back foot flexed, and I'm going to change that language right now. My toes are extended. So it's a flexed foot position, but my toes are extended. Again, it's here, right? So in natural movement training, we call that a flexed foot position. I know I'm repeating myself, but I don't want you to be confused about that. The toes are extended. Okay, so half long flexed foot kneeling, and then I'm going to ask you to bring that foot forward as you sit down. So again, it's here, and we're going to lift it up and sit down. And then as you bring yourself up to that half kneeling position, suspend this leg, in this case it's my right leg, and come out to that long, or that side long position again. Not easy work. And it feels a little like a single leg squat. And this might even get you ready for single leg squat work. If you want to advance that a little bit or progress that movement, you could suspend it, sit down, and then come back up. So I'm going to suspend it, bring the leg in front, closer to my center of gravity, and then sit down and back up. All kinds of variations on this. And then we'll go to the other side. We're here. So the first one was just get yourself situated, and then you're going to suspend, bring it down and rest, suspend, out to the side. Lots of lots of things at work here. I'll let you kind of sort that out for yourself. Definitely some balance work. Lots of knee sensation, kneecap sensations on the ground. Just play. Okay. And we will go with that for our first intermediate kneeling video. Thanks for working along. If any of that is challenging for you, or you need to pause the video, pause it, play. Yeah, and we'll see you back shortly for another kneeling video, more ground movement work.